welcome to yet another edition of E-Expressions. I have with me Debjani Ghosh, who's the president of NASSCOM, but not just that. She's also one of India's leading tech evangelists, and she's been talking and writing about technology in many ways, making it accessible to people like us. With me is Daniel Thimaya. He's chief reporter, edX, and also quite a tech enthusiast, much more than me for sure. Debjani, hello and
Bit of
welcome.
an overstatement, but okay.
Hello and welcome, Devjani. Thank you so much. The fact that we're on Zoom, during this pandemic, and the fact that Zoom became such a revolution is, in fact, testament to the power of technology itself. But you have been speaking, not just during this pandemic, but also much before that, about the power of technology and about how it can. Equalize and sort of democratize, provided it's used well. So I wanted to ask you, what have the learnings been from the pandemic, especially with virtual learning, the kind of deep digital divide we still have in this country? What have the learnings been, especially at the level of schools and colleges?
First of all, Kavri, I don't think anyone was prepared for what happened and prepared to handle what's happened, right? So while we have the luxury right now of sitting and looking back in hindsight and saying what worked, what didn't work, but at that point in time, if you go back to March, when all of us were asked to shut down,
Yeah,
literally shut down,
absolutely.
get inside our homes, not come out for whatever time frame. Um, I still remember when it happened, Kaveri, and when you know lockdown, etc., was getting announced. I was telling my people, okay, let's all stay in, let's work from home, blah blah blah, for 2 months, right? And we had the thinking that 2 months, 3 months, life will be absolutely back to normal. And I think everyone had that thinking. And then slowly it started setting in on us that we are in this for the long haul. It's definitely not going to be 2 months, 3 months. For all we know, I mean, at that point, we had started believing it will go on till end of year. And even now, when you think about it, yes, wonderful news that two vaccines have already, are in the approval process, high rates of efficacy, efficiency, etc. But the point I keep making is the vaccine is not the magic.
Yeah.
The vaccination distribution strategy is the magic. And when can you really stand up and say, okay, fine, everything can go back to normal, is when 7 billion people all around the world would have got vaccinated. So you know that, okay, that little bubble you have created in your house now extends to the whole world,
Mm.
right? And that is still going to take time. So whatever the next normal is, whether it is the old, whether it is a new future, I don't know, but whatever the next normal is, I think it's a little far away. We still have a while to get there. And I think for now we're going to largely live in a very hyper digital, and some people like to say contactless, some people like to say less contact. I honestly don't know what that means, but there's a huge debate on this, whether it's contactless or less contact. But frankly, it is going to be much less contact than before, kind of a world. And in this kind of a scenario, if you want to continue with education, which is so critical in the child's development, upbringing, I think technology pretty much came in and saved the day in by at least of offering you the platform, right? Now, what we forget, Kaveri, is that technology is just a tool. A lot depends on how we humans will use the tool,
That's right.
right? Now, when we as parents or whatever go completely overboard and say, okay, because it's there, the child, teachers, parents, what, I'm not putting the blame on anyone's side, but I think overall, just assume that because technology is there, the child can go figure it out all and start learning, is when we get into a problem. I think what the pandemic has taught us is the world will be a technology plus human world.
Yeah.
There has to be a partnership between technology and human.
Hmm.
Each one will have a different role to play. Technology will have its role to play. Humans will also have their role to play to ensure the technology gets used right, be it for education, be it for health, be it for anything. And I think trying to understand the role of humans and what we have to do in this machine plus human world is where the challenge is, because it's going to require significant change in thinking, skilling, mindset, culture, beliefs, everything, in order for us to adapt to that world as parents, as teachers, or any other profession you're in, right? So what we have learned is, if we use technology, long answer, to what you asked, but in short, yes, technology can absolutely be used to bridge the gap, that pandemic is creating,
Yeah.
the physical gap that pandemic is creating. But the key question is, how does it get used? How do we as humans use it?
And Debjani, the question added to this really is, you've also talked about technology creating job displacement rather than, job reduction, which again is a very interesting concept, because that means that there has to be a certain level of skilling and reskilling that goes on. So talk a little about that, because that again is perhaps one of the predominant fears about technology.
Yeah, and I struggled with that because job displacements have happened and from the time of the first industrial revolution. Think about when steam engines came into
Exactly.
play, right? There were job displacements that happened even then. So this is not a new thing, right? Whenever there is a new invention that comes, which has a huge impact on our lives, like technology, it changes how we do certain things, changes how we work. And when it starts changing how we do things, whether it's how we learn, how we work, how we play, it it creates new opportunities, right? Now this is not a new concept. Let's go back 10 years, okay, just the last decade. Think of all the new jobs that got created. Were Uber drivers a reality 10 years back?
Right.
How many millions of them exist now?
Mm.
Were Swiggy delivery boys or Zomato delivery boys a reality 10 years back? Were
Right.
social media marketing professionals a reality 10 years back?
Right.
So jobs continue to get, it's nothing new.
Yeah.
Every time a new technology comes in that becomes pervasive, it creates new opportunities, it creates new jobs. Yes, and when it does that, it creates displacement, because while the traditional advertising or marketing manager may not have gone away, but the traditional advertising marketing manager today will not be relevant unless they know social media skills,
Right.
unless they understand social media platforms, online platforms. So that's what I talk about when I say job displacements that happen. Similarly, a typical job displacements that happening right now is, in the past, the coders or the engineers
Hmm.
used to sit in the back end and code.
Hmm.
They never had to come face to face with customers.
Hmm.
But in today's world, I call it the age of bilinguals,
Hmm.
because you can't sit and code in a room. You
Hmm.
have to sit in front of the customer, given that technology is pretty much not solving a particular problem, but helping the customer reinvent their complete business model. You
Right.
have to sit in front of the customer, understand his business, understand the problems, and then figure out how you want to create the solution or code in order to solve. So that's a job displacement when engineering is concerned. So technology is one, creating several new jobs. Two, it's called displacing old jobs and how they were done. And what that means is we need reskilling on steroids to stay relevant. Because the jobs are, do you know that today in India, the skills like AI, data analytics, data science, robotics, what we call the new age or emerging technologies, the demand that exists for people in these areas is 8x the supply.
Right.
By 2025, it's going to be 20x plus.
Right.
So jobs are going to be there, but people are still going to be unemployed because they're not bothering enough to get skilled for these new jobs.
Now, Daniel, just one quick question and then over to you. Just added to this was the idea, Devjani, that, when we talk about reskilling and learning, relearning and unlearning, how useful do you think the new education policy, the new national education policy has been towards this? Because while it does talk about lifelong learning, does it actually deliver on it? Have you had a chance to look at it in depth?
I have had a chance to look at it in depth. I think it's a blessing, honestly. Reading it gave me so much joy. It's an absolute blessing because it addresses so many things that we've been talking about, multidisciplinary, which is such an important need, continuous learning, and so much more. There is so much more to it. The challenge is always is how does it get executed, how
Right.
does it get implemented. So as a policy, I think whoever, all the folks who worked on the policy have really done an outstanding job. I mean, 10 out of 10 to them. The question now is, how will it get implemented, and what changes are we going to see in schools and colleges as we drive that implementation, and more importantly, how quickly will it get implemented?
I'm curious to, because we've been talking to, the people who actually drafted the policy, and they seem to have a bit of a longer outlay. They were talking about how it's going to take a good 2 to 3 years before, you even begin to see the effects of how the policy will shape education and the future of skilling as we know it. Uh, but you mentioned that there's an 8x gap right now in emerging technologies, and that's going to go to 20x. You mentioned in the next 5 years or so. uh, Currently, the way colleges and institutes and all of these edtech platforms out there, all of them are offering diplomas in AI, they're offering diplomas in IoT, ML, and all of these things, emerging technologies. Uh, do you honestly see this as something that is plugging that gap, or is at least helping mid-career professionals or early career professionals sort of move towards plugging that gap?
And by this, what do you mean? The NEP?
I mean, the NEP, I mean, it's obviously too early to talk about the effects of the
Yeah.
NEP. But I'm talking about how, for the last, say, 5 to 10 years, colleges and institutions have been talking about,
Okay.
we've,
Okay.
we've got these new programs, we've got external people coming on board, we have industry professionals. But do you see that as something that's actually helping to plug it at a rate that's fast enough?
No, it's not. I think there are lots of parallel tracks that are going on today, and when in a situation like this, you can't go sequential, so you have to go parallel. So one of the things is the industry, especially the IT industry, has made reskilling the number one priority. So if you look at the numbers, both in terms of the dollars that's going into reskilling, and the numbers that are getting reskilled, it's substantial, it's huge, and it keeps increasing. Second, you're going to have, the universities are getting in the game now. You're seeing courses, etc., come up. But Daniel, I have a little bit of a different outlook on this, and maybe it's a little bit more long term, which is, see, there is no end point um, to technology, right?
It's
So
continuously evolving. I
we
get
can't
that.
play catch up, right?
Yeah.
Because we will never catch up. When we reach the level it is today, by that time it would have moved 10 steps ahead, right? So I think we need and that's why the NEP, or at least what I understood of the NEP, really excited me, because we need a fundamental change in our thinking of education. I mean, in my mind, education has to do two things. One is it has to build strong foundation in maths, science, um, in some of the emerging, the like data science has to be, it should be a must, right? Some of the important emerging areas, data science, robotics, IoT. Yes, it should teach people to code, not to become millionaires, but it should teach people to code so they can at least stay relevant in their lives, right, and solve problems in their lives. So I think education on one hand has to build a strong, and I don't think it's a STEM foundation. I call it a STEAM foundation because it's a
Right.
mixture of STEM and arts, liberal arts. Both have to come together. So the foundation in STEAM is extremely important. And the second thing that education has to do is build a trainable mindset. I think if education has to define its job one, the job one for any education system has to be, are you building that adaptable, trainable mindset? Because no matter how good a job the school or the university does, by the time the kid joins a company, everything they have learned is unfortunately going to be outdated.
Yeah. And
Not
they'll have to
everything,
unlearn
maybe, but 60%.
pretty much all of it. Yeah. No, I get where you're going with this. But I have to ask because talking about core IT territory, uh, when you look at the willingness to learn and unlearn and actually upskill when you're mid-career, when you're in your 30s or when you're in late 20s, and like you said, uh, the kind of stuff that they studied 10 years ago is probably so out of sync that it makes no sense anymore. Do you find that in the industry today, and it's an industry that's pouring billions into, keeping their employees relevant, do you think that that mindset is there at this point of time in the IT industry in India to want to
Um,
upskill?
if you see the numbers, I think you will believe that the mindset is definitely growing. Um, it's not an easy change. I mean, go back to our education systems. Go back to the time we all graduated, etc. It's not an easy change, right? When you're growing up, you've always been taught that with school or college, your education ends. No one told you that with the end of school and college, the real education begins, right? So it's a big mindset change, right? Now, either you have to be tremendously lucky to have a teacher like I did, who makes you realize that the ability to learn is the biggest strength that you can have, and you can conquer any problem if you have the ability to learn and you have a strong foundation in the core subjects. Um, so that is the role of education, the desired role of education. And I think as people more and more, there is a realization that is growing that it's not anymore whether I want to do this or not. The question to ask is, do I want to be employable? Do I want to have a job? Do I want to keep the job? If the answer to those is yes, then you don't have an option. So I think that realization is slowly beginning to set in. I'll give you one example. When the lockdown happened, NASCOM runs this platform, skilling platform, Future Skills, with the industry. When the
Okay.
pandemic happened, we have some fantastic courses on it. Really fantastic, because all our courses are created by industry, so they're exactly based on what industry needs. And we were working with ministry to open up the platform, which we've just done, by the way, a week back, to everybody, so everyone can come and benefit. But at that time we were still working. And when the lockdown happened, we said, why don't we test it out? Let's take 3 or 4 of our best courses, make it completely free, and put it out there. See whether people are interested or not. We were blown away by the results. Absolutely blown away by the results. I mean, more than some 100,000 people participated. And whereas an average MOOC will have a single digit completion rate,
Right.
during the
It's
lockdown for these
usually under
courses, we had a
7%.
high double digit completion rate, which was tremendously,
Promising. Yeah.
yeah, it was very positive. So yeah, I think it's changing, but it'll take some time.
Okay.
Debjani, I also wanted to ask about the gender gap here. Have we seen a deepening of the gender gap in the use of technology during the pandemic? There is this concern.
Not in the use of technology. I don't think there is any gap in the use of technology. There are two problems here, right? One is, and this has got nothing to do with the pandemic, but every time we have prioritized who to skill, um, the unknown biases come into play. And usually it's the men who get pushed forward, saying you should be the first ones to get skilled. So one of the things we have been doing is making sure that leaders at least, I mean, holding up the mirror so they realize that they have these biases. And we started a program with a very my team came up with a very corny name, Women Wizards Rule Tech, W square RT. But guess what, it worked. I mean, the women loved it, right? I was just like, what the hell is this? But they loved it. So we came up with a program where we went to all companies to remind them the role of women in technology,
Okay.
and why it's important for them to front end the women for these trainings. And I was again overwhelmed by the response. The number of women that have been going through the trainings and the support the companies have extended is fabulous. So to your point, Kaveri, yes, there are these unconscious biases that exist. I think what we have to do is keep holding up the mirror so leaders wake up to these biases and correct them quickly. So, but it's but if you don't hold up the mirror, then yes, women will get left behind. So it's extremely important to ensure we have those conversations. What happened during the pandemic actually was twofold. One, we saw companies opening up much more to hiring diverse talents. So there was a much more willingness for companies to hire women, hire disabled people, because working from home changed a lot of the uh, problems that you would have earlier with respect to travel, etc., etc. But what was happening is, working from home for women became working from home and work for home.
Oh,
And
exactly.
for men, it became working from home, period. Right? For most men, not all men. There are some good men who took on the role of working for home too. But most
Daniel's
Same.
men
holding
would,
up his hand.
but a lot of men sort of said, oh, I'm working much more and etc. I can't do anything. And I think that became a problem
Yeah,
where a lot of women employees felt they're just not able to cope, child learning from home, looking after home and working. And a lot of companies started, one, talking to the men to make them realize that things have to change. For them too, working from home has to be working for home. And also started coming out with ways and means the women could handle some of it, flexible hours. You don't have to, when you're remote working, you don't have to work from 9 to 6. Work when it suits you, as long as you complete. It's not the number of hours, but it's the outcome, right? So a lot of these, and these are new behavior that we are learning as we get into this next normal.
yeah.
I think the future of work is going to look very different from what it did in the past.
Yeah, just an additional question to this. What was the reaction to men who were told to work for home? Were they receptive to it, or was
Yeah, I think, again, I think what we are dealing with is our unconscious biases. We are not dealing with conscious biases, thankfully.
right,
We're dealing with very unconscious biases. So again, I keep using this term, but I think it is such an effective thing to do is just hold up the mirror and make someone realize.
right? So
And
while
I think,
there is an innate wish to perhaps do it, but they're not aware that what they're doing is not
yeah,
quite correct.
exactly. And I think these conversations, especially when the companies start having these conversations, it definitely helps.
Right. Daniel, is that something you would like to talk about? We were earlier talking about trust that Devjani has been talking about in the work from home situation.
I know. Debjani's, of course, been talking about the need for trust within the industry, the need to trust startups, and the need to trust technology and technology startups as we go forward. Debjani, do you think that we as Indians, at a time when the market is contracting, and of course we keep hearing that it will grow, do you think we have it in us to find that trust at
Well,
multiple
if we
levels?
don't, then we are doomed. Because for me, trust is going to be the most important currency of this hyper digital world that we are getting into. Decisions are going to be based on who you trust and who you don't. As simple as that. If I'm a customer and you're pitching for my business, more than anything else, more than cost, I'm going to consider whether you are trustworthy enough to keep my business running no matter what. What if there's another wave and things get much worse? Are you investing enough in keeping your employees safe? Because your employees are crucial to keep my business running. you know so all of a sudden, this focus on trust has changed a lot of things. For example, it has made employee wellness a CEO topic. Employee wellness was never really a CEO topic or priority, but employee
It
wellness
was a
today has
HR topic,
become
yeah.
an absolute CEO topic, because without that and without showing they're doing enough, customers won't trust them. Are you doing enough to invest in cybersecurity measures so that you can protect my data and my business in this kind of a world where we are seeing cybersecurity risks go up significantly by the day? So trust is going to become the currency of the factor or criteria on which decisions are going to be made. So I can't even imagine a world where we are not seen as trustworthy, and I don't believe it, because if you look at the companies that are the flag bearers of Indian IT, the Indian IT services companies, you know, I have talked to a lot of their customers, and they serve more than 70% of Fortune 500 companies, and they are trusted more than anyone else. Even in the pandemic, they were trusted blindly to keep the banks running, the hospitals running, governments running
Services,
world
yeah,
over.
absolutely.
And they delivered to the trust. So I think we are actually strengthening the trust narrative.
Right. And along with this, Debjani, the trust narrative, is there also the narrative of hyper specialization, of domain expertise, not just for corporates but also for individuals? That the more they invest in themselves and in their expertise, the more that they will be trusted.
You see, expertise is important, but I think more than expert, you need some level of expertise. You need the strong foundational skills, as I said, not just in technology, but in problem solving, in communication. But more than that, you need to show your willingness and your ability to learn new things.
Right.
That is a much bigger criteria today, because I mean, think of it, for success today, you need three things. You need strong foundation in technology.
Hmm.
You need strong foundation in what I call professional skills.
Hmm.
And then third, you need domain expertise.
Right.
It's going to be very difficult for anyone to build expertise in all three areas. You
Yeah.
have to show you can continuously learn, you can continuously improve, but yes, you need one grounding. You need to be an expert in something.
Something.
So uh, I think this place is gonna evolve a bit more, but I think what's important is to show strong foundation, and that hunger, that passion, that willingness, and the ability to learn quickly is what's going to get employers interested.
Because there's a certain amount of discontent, and there is a bit of, not a bit but quite a bit of discontent about
Resentment
job
as well.
losses,
Yeah.
or people who've been retrenched, people who've had to be dismissed. There's a lot of discontent about that. So what is your advice to them out there? Is it the three things that you just talked about?
Yeah, so again, it depends on which sectors you are in, right? As I said, um, see, there are three things that we know for sure about the future.
Hmm.
It is going to be hyper digital,
Right.
it is going to be largely contactless,
Hmm.
and it is going to be VUCA on steroids.
Right.
We've been talking about VUCA, but what we have seen till now, the volatility that we were used to, was just a trailer.
Mhm.
What we are seeing now in the last few months, I hope is the real film. I hope this is not a second trailer and there's something worse to come. But is the reality. And what we do know is that the world is going to be very, very volatile, right? Now, again, it depends on which sector you're in, because a lot of the physical, I'll give you an example. I was just before this speaking to at an SME event where a lot of SMEs were saying how businesses have stopped. They've lost businesses. Now, we've actually done the research. Now, while traditional physical businesses, manufacturing, travel, retail, there's been a loss of anything between 10 to 40% revenue in the physical sectors. SMEs who have been able to pivot and move to more virtual businesses, e-health, e-education, e-games, whatever, have actually now at a phase where they're beginning to show that they will end the year anything between 10 to 20% growth. Okay?
That's promising.
So the world is changing. Now you can sit back and said, this is how I did it in the past. And it is not relevant anymore. But I don't want to change. I will keep trying because it's not relevant anymore and life is unfair. Yes, life is unfair. Life is unfair for everyone, right? But I think we have a choice here because the writing's on the wall. You know, we know what's going to happen. So we have a choice whether we want to change or we don't want to change. And that's a choice we have to exercise.
Yeah. But I was meaning to ask you two very small things before we wrap up. One is, there was a very interesting study that NASCOM had done on OTTs and the growth that you all foresee in the next, was it 2023, if I'm not mistaken?
Which growth?
The growth, OTTs, OTT platforms,
Oh,
and the
OTT
kind of
platform.
growth.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
actually have not read up on that study as yet, but yes, I believe that study is out.
2023 is 5 billion is what they're looking at, and that's hugely emergent. But I think what's been even bigger during this pandemic is, of course, the way edtech platforms have grown. I mean, the kind of numbers, first they said
EdTech,
20x,
health
then
tech, all the tech
they said
platforms have grown.
they said 20x, they said 40x, and now I
Yeah.
don't know. I think we've run out of numbers even. Uh, where do you see it in, say, 10 years as far as the Indian market is concerned? I mean, what do you foresee for the future of Indian edtech?
Daniel, the one thing I've done during the pandemic is I've taken that crystal ball and I've trashed it because it makes no sense to look into crystal ball grazing is passe. It's done with, it's dead. There is absolutely no sense in trying to look at it and predict what will happen in the next 5 years. I think today the challenge is to predict how will the next 12 months go. And we'll have to see how it plays out. Agility is key. And the more you think through long-term plans, the more limitations you're going to set for your business in this kind of an environment where your world is getting disrupted. And I don't think I exaggerate when I say that. When your world is pretty much getting disrupted daily, you have the opportunity to reinvent. So I would strongly advise that we stop crystal ball racing. It doesn't help anyone. Everyone forgets what they said after for the next 5 years or whatever. As I said, the only thing I do know is in the next 4 or 5 years, the digitization is going to significantly go up. Whatever platforms, whatever verticals there is not going to be a single vertical left that will not get digitized. Let me just put it that way. Not a single vertical left. It cannot be
And do
left
you think
behind,
that
right? So
but do you think that this kind of phenomenal lockdown growth that we've seen, that's got to be just localized, right? I mean, we obviously can't see these sectors growing at this kind of rate for too long.
I actually do not agree with that fully, because I think what we have seen in lockdown is again a teaser in terms of the potential that's out there. Uh, yes, there might be, yes, there's going to be some sort of a hybrid model that will emerge in every vertical, which is going to be a mix of physical and digital. But at the same time, I think the digital opportunities right now, we've just touched the tip of the iceberg. So I honestly
Yeah,
think that the
I
growth
agree.
potential exists. Now, I don't know, and I'll not put a number to it at this stage, But I
Nobody,
think
I think, can put a number to it, honestly.
there's a very
Yeah,
healthy growth potential that exists, especially for Indian companies, because do not forget that when you solve a problem in a meaningful way in India, it has implications all over the world.
globally. Yeah,
So,
Absolutely.
so it's not just the India market.
Right.
Our companies should be aggressively looking at global markets, and
Yeah.
everywhere around the world. You're going to see the same thing where people are going to move to a more digital space um, than they did in the past.
Yeah. Debjani, adding to this point again, when you talk about when you solve a problem in India, you're actually solving it for the world. What are the opportunities in the global world for a new, more digitally equal India? Especially in things like healthcare, for instance, where we're already, leaders in many ways. What are the areas or the careers, possibly, that you could outline for us, which could be where we could be global leaders?
So I think I'm very strong advocate of this one, but I think India's biggest opportunity lies in developing the talent for the future. We have to be the global leaders when it comes to developing the digital talent that the world will need. Just as, if you remember, when a few years back, when the startup ecosystem was just beginning to take shape, Israel stood up and said, we are going to become the startup nation of the world.
Right,
I think
right.
that's
this
right.
is India's moment to stand up and say, we are going to become the talent nation of the world.
Hmm.
So, first and foremost, I think talent has to become the biggest competitive advantage the country has, because in the future, businesses will go where talent is.
Hmm.
Talent is in such short supply and will stay in such short supply over the next few years. Businesses will base investment decisions, future investment decisions, etc., based on where talent exists. And India has to become that hub for digital talent. So that's the first opportunity. I think the second opportunity is identifying problems that have not yet been solved. And this is where I think India can change the rules of the game in innovation by applying a people first lens to innovation. If we can start looking at innovation not as that latest cool technology, but more as how big a problem can our innovation solve. Because when we apply that lens, the problem solving, the people lens to innovation, look at what comes in to play: energy crisis, climate change, water crisis, the entire gender crisis, or equal opportunity, inclusion. There are
Healthcare,
so
healthcare as well, mental wellness,
healthcare,
healthcare.
absolutely. I mean, the problems that come up are so much more meaningful, bigger than coming up with a self-automated drone or helicopter, which is great. But that, to me, that's not how innovation should be looked at. Innovation needs to be defined in terms of the problem it solves. And I think India can play a critical role in creating that framework for innovation. Um, and I think the third area, given that when you think about technology, the one field that is going to dominate the technology landscape is artificial intelligence, right? I mean, that's pretty much going to dominate the technology landscape. I think India can absolutely take the lead in thinking through how to ensure that we build and we use technology in a very responsible way. Because while there are discussions and dialogues on that, nobody is creating a framework, a plan to make that happen. And that's a discussion I'm having with the government, because I think that's a huge opportunity for India. Because, especially given the diversity of our population, we need technology to act as an equalizer in India. We cannot have technology creating bigger gaps. It'll be a
Exactly.
disaster for us. So,
Yeah.
how do we become the country that shows the way forward to inclusive use of AI, to responsible build of AI? I think that's a huge opportunity that awaits India. So, for me, these are some of the areas where I would love to see India to taking the lead in the future.
That's very interesting, Debjani. The other day, I was speaking to someone who teaches at Harvard and also works in mental health in Goa, and he was talking about the community health workers model, which actually now is in a way being adopted in America as well, which originated in India. So there's a lot of learning that can happen around the world, as you said, with a people first approach, because that's something that we have plenty of.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that was quite a remarkable discussion. Daniel, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Absolutely not. Thank you very much. It's been
Thank
stimulating
Thank
to
you.
you.
learn.
Thank you, Debjani. I
Thank
think
you
it
so
was
much.
yeah, it was really enlightening for us, and I think for our viewers as well. Lots of tips for us as well for staying relevant. Thank you, Debjani. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Stay
Thank
safe,
you,
please.
Kaveri.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Debjani.